Good evening and welcome. It is 7:02. This is the May 8th, 2024 public hearing of the Land Use Commission. The City Code directs this body to hear applications for map and text amendments, special uses including planned developments, zoning relief, and appeals from the decisions of the zoning administrator, as well as to make recommendations regarding the city's long-term planning goals and objectives. Depending on the type of matter, this commission will either make a final determination or a recommendation to City Council. Ms. Jones, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Arevalo?
Here.
Commissioner Halleck?
Here.
Commissioner Hugo is absent. Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Linwall?
Here.
Commissioner Murinchev?
Here.
Commissioner Puctel?
Here.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Here.
Chair Rogers?
Here. So with 8 members, we do have a quorum. Also present from city staff tonight are Neighborhood and Land Use Planner Megan Jones and Zoning Administrator Melissa Klotz. This is a formal hearing, and there are rules that govern our proceedings. Most importantly, only one person speaks at a time so that all testimony may be accurately recorded. Anyone who wishes to address the commission regarding any matter on tonight's agenda will be given the opportunity to do so at the appropriate time. Our procedure is to hear from staff on the documents on file and then receive testimony and other evidence from the applicant or appellant. After that, persons wishing to make a statement regarding the matter will have a chance to do so. Any person with a legal interest in property located within the defined notification requirements of the subject property may present evidence, reasonably question witnesses, or seek a continuance of the hearing. When all supporting and opposing testimony has been heard, the applicant or appellant will be given the opportunity for rebuttal or a closing statement. Then the commission will close the record and begin deliberations to consider the standards. The commission will make formal findings of fact based on the testimony and evidence presented, guided by the standards, the commissioner's knowledge of the community, and the recommendations of staff. All testimony is taken under oath. Although we do not apply the strict rules of evidence, please limit your testimony to the proposal as it relates to the standards contained in the zoning ordinance and the corresponding staff memorandum. When testifying, please state your name and address for the record and sign in on the provided public comment sheet. Our meetings are audio and video recorded. Please make sure that you are at a microphone when asking questions or making statements so that you may be properly recorded. All proceedings are subject to broadcast at a later date. Any matter not concluded at tonight's hearing will be continued to our next regularly scheduled meeting. We do have 2 agenda items tonight. The first one is a special use for 1819 1825 Dodge. Is the applicant present? Thank you. And the other one is for 1567 Maple Avenue, and is that applicant present? Yes. Thank you. With that, we will move into our agenda. The first item on the agenda is the approval of meeting minutes. We only have meeting minutes from the February 7th meeting, so I will ask if there is a motion for approval.
I'll move approval.
Moved by Commissioner Lindwall. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Westerberg. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, there's a correction. The presiding member is listed as Matt Rogers, and you were not present at that, so it should say Max Puctel.
All right. Any other edits? If not, all those in favor of approving the minutes from February 7th with that edit, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And I will note that Commissioner Arevalo and I were not present at that meeting, so we will not be voting. So with 6 votes in favor, the motion carries and the minutes are approved. With that, we will move now to the first case on the agenda this evening, which is 1819 1825 Dodge Avenue, 24 ZMJV 0017. And if I could ask to have that read into the record, please.
John Turner, architect, submits for a special use for an addition to expand a religious institution, Seventh-day Adventist Church, in the R4 General Residential District, Section 6853. The applicant requests expansion of currently existing special use ordinance 21080 that granted the original construction and use of the religious institution at 1825 Dodge Avenue. Expansion for an addition at 1819 to 1823 Dodge Avenue was subsequently approved by Special Use and Major Variation Ordinance 63009. The approved major variation for impervious surface coverage remains intact and does not expire. However, the special use expansion for Ordinance 63009 is expired since the expansion did not occur within 1 year of special use approval, Section 63515. The applicant requests reapproval of the expansion for a religious institution as was granted in Ordinance 63009 with no substantial changes or modifications requested from that previous proposal. The Land Use Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council, the determining body for this case, in accordance with Section 635 of the Evanston Zoning Code.
Thank you, Ms. Klotz. At this point, I'm going to ask anybody who may be speaking to us on this particular matter to please be sworn. If you would raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings? I do. Thank you. And if you would please come up to the lectern and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Robert Kirk. I'm an architect with Group A Architecture. Address is 1100 Landmeyer, Elk Grove Village.
All right. Mr. Kirk, if you'd please tell us about the proposal.
Sure. Again, my name is Robert Kirk. I'm the architect on the project, and we are here to get permission to add an addition to an existing church, the Evanston First Seventh-day Adventist Church. The original church was started at this particular site in the 1970s, and it was started in a wood frame 3-flat, and from there, and it's been in continuous use and continuous attendance since the 1950s. In the 1970s, there was an existing church building that is there now that was built, and it's a very strong stone and brick church that we're going to hopefully be putting an addition onto. It's approximately 3,600 square feet. And we're going to be proposing an addition of approximately 10,000 square feet. There are 30 proposed parking spaces on site. The parking spaces are at the rear of the site, and the main entrance will stay at the front entrance along Dodge Street. This is a copy of the site plan that we're proposing. We'll be using the same brick materials as the existing church that's there now, and very similar design elements. We want to have this addition be a seamless design that fits into the neighborhood and looks like a real expansion, and we're finishing off on the original design intent of the building. The existing parking will be modified. We are keeping all the main trees on the property, and we're also keeping the landscaping as is. We are going to improve somewhat on the landscaping around that parking lot in the back. And again, the vehicle access is off the alley in the back. The building meets all of the setback requirements, the density requirements, the bulk requirements, and the parking requirements for the R4. So we're not asking for any variances on any of the zoning issues for this lot. The church has a well-known active outreach program that's been active for decades. It's a well-respected neighbor. It's been an important part of the neighborhood for decades, and is very involved in the local community and very, very much a part of the neighborhood, in which we want to keep and we want to expand. We look for your support and approvals, and I will open it up for questions.
Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Westerberg?
Can you just indicate the exact dimension of the setback between the new expansion and the neighbor to the south?
I'm gonna have to cheat a little bit. Okay, so the front setback, the front yard setback is 30 feet. But the required is 27 feet, even though we're pushing it back a little bit further to 30 feet. But on the south, you're talking about to the alley from the building?
Sorry, you have a house right there to the left of your
Here, the
addition.
side yard setback?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's 10 feet, which is the required setback.
okay. And then, so it's set back even further from the house
Yes, it
itself,
is.
right? Okay.
Exactly.
And then I was not able to tell from the plans, do you plan on any fencing around the property, any new fencing? I noticed there's fencing for the neighbors, I just wasn't sure what else you had planned.
No, the only thing that we're planning is some more landscape fencing on the sides. Yep.
Other questions? I just have one quick question for you. So the addition is for a new sanctuary, is my understanding, correct?
Correct.
The current building also has a smaller sanctuary.
Correct.
Is that space being repurposed? What is the plan for the older part of the building once the new part gets built, assuming it's approved?
Right. There's no improvements except for possibly a new roof and some new windows on the existing church. But the interior, including all the seating, will stay as is. So there will be really two sanctuaries, one for special occasions and the other for the
Okay.
typical Saturday
All right,
attendance.
okay. Any other questions? All right, I'll open it up to the floor. I see I have one speaker signed up, which is Mr. Green. So I'll ask Rodney Green if he'd like to come up and make a statement. And then, Mr. Kirk, I'll call you up at the end again.
Yeah. Good evening, Clerk and Commissioners. Thank you for letting me speak here today. I'm a resident of Everson, live in the 5th Ward, and I have been attending the church at 1825 Dodge over some years. I just want to say that the church has been there and is really doing a good job. It was built by my in-laws, the Turners and the Boones, and I believe that it serves a great purpose. I know that when the first time came up to expand the church, there was a delay, and the delay was because of our organization. Pastors doesn't stay longer than 4 to 5 years. They transfer it out. So at the time that proposal came up, the pastor then left. I think it fell through the cracks, but I believe that it was a worthwhile project to extend it. They have really outgrown the property itself. They're getting more memberships in there, and I think that this would be a great job for you to approve it. At that time, I had signed the documents because I was a clerk at that time. So I believe that this would be a very good establishment to getting the church renovated and expanded. They can now use it. The new expansion will also include, I think, a gymnasium for their social activities, basketball, and things like that. But they're very good neighbors to the neighborhood, and I think it'd be a great job. I just hope that you all would just go and approve it and let this get underway without a 30, 60, or 90-day delay. Oh, did I tell you my name? Oh,
Yes.
Rodney Green, 2016 Brown Avenue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak to us on this? Not seeing anyone, Mr. Kirk, I'll ask you to just come up. Anything you'd like to say in summation before we close the record and begin deliberation?
No, other than the fact that we came up with a minimum of 3 designs for the site, and we feel that, and we also looked at the opportunity of replacing the existing church, but we feel that what we came up with is the right, correct solution. The existing church has really good bones, super well made, and by replacing just the windows and the roof, I think it's going to be there for another 100 years.
All right. And just one question, just a clarification question, since our record moves on to City Council. This is currently an empty lot, correct?
Empty lot next to the existing church.
Yeah, the space where you'll be building.
Correct. There's no demolition.
Right,
Correct.
right.
That's
Yep,
correct.
I just wanted to get that in the record, so when it moves to city council, if anybody has a question about it, they know that we aren't tearing anything down.
Correct.
We're building on an empty lot to an adjoining property.
Mr. Turner, can I ask a question?
Mr. Kirk.
Excuse me, Kirk, thank you. The packet says that you're requesting reapproval of the expansion as was granted in the ordinance 63009 with no substantial changes or modifications requested from that previous proposal. Are there other non-substantial changes that are occurring that are worth mentioning or not?
There are some details. This is not the same design that was presented back then. I believe on that proposal, there was an entrance from Dodge, so we no longer have a vehicle entrance from Dodge. We have all the vehicle access from the alley in the back, which we feel is an improvement. We did keep the front entrance. As you can see, there's a sidewalk. There's a sidewalk that we're keeping from Dodge. So this is going to end up being the main entrance. We are making some other minor changes to the existing church. There's a handicap ramp that we're going to be taking out. That's in bad repair. So we do have an elevator now proposed, and these floors will line up between the existing and the new church addition. So we feel that the improvements that we're making are beneficial to the congregation, and it's going to work better.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we will close public testimony and begin our deliberations. I'm taking it based on what I've heard from questions or lack thereof, that everyone feels this is pretty straightforward. I went back and looked at the old transcript just to see what I had done then, because I was on ZBA at that time. Wanted to make sure I didn't contradict myself. There are no variations requested here. It really is just for the special use, which expired, from what we've heard testimony-wise, due to a transfer in leadership at the church. Anybody have anything they want to point out?
Just a comment. It just occurs to me that, well, it certainly occurred to me when I first read this in our packet, that why isn't it just a administrative decision? Why does it have to come through us?
Because it's a special use.
I understand. I understand the zoning. I'm questioning the zone. I'm questioning the zoning rule. Why is it that way?
Because that's how the zoning ordinance is currently written, and we're very hopeful that there will be changes to that in the near future.
I was going to suggest that there be changes in the future because I think it's just not efficient.
It is just as frustrating to staff as it is to the applicant or to the commission to have to redo the same work
Right.
for the
We need to work on eliminating frustration.
All right.
I have just one question, actually, for staff. Understanding that we want to limit frustration and more work, but given the fact that the original request was made in 2009, right? And the ordinance was approved at that time. It's now 2024. So that doesn't seem unreasonable to say, let's take a look at the whole package and just understand if there have been any changes. So I don't know. I'm curious as to whether you think the time, there should be a different kind of time limitation on looking at these things, or what you would recommend.
My personal hope would be that there could be something similar to how plan developments are now handled, where there's different paths depending on if there's a major adjustment or a minor adjustment or simply an extension. So there's still a public process, but it doesn't have to redo the entire public hearing and process.
Anything else? If not, there are a set of standards. There are 9 standards that we must find are met for recommendation to approve a special use. The first one of those being that it is one of the listed special uses for the zoning district in which the property lies. A religious institution is an approved special use in the residential districts, including the R4 district in which this sits. So that standard is met. Number 2, it complies with the purposes and policies of the Comprehensive General Plan and the zoning ordinance. One of the things the comp plan does seek to do is to allow organizations and businesses to, where necessary, expand, update their properties in order to meet the changing needs of those organizations and businesses. The fact that the building is being added onto next to an existing building that is not being torn down, but really just building in an empty lot. This was a plan that's been in the works for many, many years. And so I believe that that standard is also met. Number 3, it does not cause a negative cumulative effect in combination with the existing special uses or as a category of land use. This is a church, and churches do play a certain role where they have not just religious impacts, but also community impacts. The fact that we have a group of about 10 people, from what I can count just roughly here, who appear to be here in support of it, not hearing that they're here in opposition to it, and that it does fit into and has been a part of this neighborhood for a long time, I do not believe that this would cause any negative cumulative effect. Number 4, it does not interfere with or diminish the value of property in the neighborhood. Same thing basically that I just said for standard number 3. This is an improvement and an upgrade to a building that brings it into a more modern facility, the current facility being built in 1970, bringing in things like an elevator, things like this to make it more functioning, I think will just have a positive impact on the neighborhood. Number 5, it can be adequately served by public facilities and services. Again, nothing that we've heard would lead me to believe that the existing support for this property would not be able to adapt so that this additional change could be included and absorbed without much difficulty. So I believe that standard is met. Number 6, it does not cause undue traffic congestion. We didn't really talk about traffic, but a church typically is a neighborhood institution for the most part. Most people are coming from a short distance. We are being asked to increase the parking that is allowed on the space. It seems like all of the parking comes in off the alley, which should limit the impact for the actual street. So I believe that this standard is met. Number 7, it preserves significant historical and architectural resources. We didn't really talk about that. The building is an existing building. I don't believe that it is a significant historical or architectural building. However, the fact that they are wanting to make the addition feel like it is part of an existing building, I think speaks volumes, and I believe that this standard is met. Number 8, it preserves significant natural and environmental resources. We did have some discussion about the trees. The plan is to maintain all of the mature trees on the property, as well as to add some additional landscaping on the property once the new addition is built. And number 9, it complies with all other applicable regulations. I believe that standard is met. I have no reason to believe there's anything that would be done that would violate any existing city ordinances. Does everyone agree with my findings on fact? If so, I will ask, first off, if there are any conditions that anyone feels needs to be placed on the property.
Staff had suggested 3, substantial compliance with the documents and testimony on record, that the applicant shall construct a subsurface stormwater detention system on the subject property that shall be subject to review and approval by the city's Public Works Agency and recommendation of the special use ordinance with the Cook County Recorder of Deeds, which I believe in reading the packet were all consistent with the original special use ordinance. So I would suggest those, and with respect to the stormwater detention, that's kind of a standard requirement anyway. So I would suggest those.
All right. Anything beyond those 3? If not, I will ask if there is a motion to recommend approval of the project.
Sure, I'll go for it. With respect to special use 24ZMJV-0017 for a religious institution expansion for the Seventh-day Adventist Church at 1819 to 1825 Dodge Avenue. I recommend, would recommend that the Land Use Commission recommend approval, subject to, with the addition of the 3 conditions that I just mentioned.
All right.
I think I've got everything I'm supposed to.
It's been moved by Commissioner Lindwall. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Puctel. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Aravallo,
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Linwall,
Yes,
Commissioner Mudinchev,
Yes.
Commissioner Puctel,
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg,
Yes.
Chair Rogers.
Yes. So with 8 votes in favor and none in opposition, the project will move forward to City Council with a recommendation for approval. You can work with city staff. They'll let you know exactly when you'll appear on City Council's docket and help you move through the process. Thank you and good luck with your project. With that, we will move on to the second item on our agenda, which is another church. It's church night at Land Use Commission tonight. So let me just get to that page in my document here. Ms. Klotz, would you like to read that one into the record as well?
Jeffrey Clements, member, submits for a special use for a religious institution, Second Church of Christ Scientist, in the D3 Downtown Core Development District, Section 61143, and a major variation to add 0 parking spaces where 4 parking spaces are required to establish a religious institution in an existing building in a downtown district. Section 616, Table 16B, and 616 1-2. The Land Use Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council, the determining body for this case, in accordance with Section 635 and 638 of the Evanston Zoning Code.
Thank you. I'm going to ask anybody who may be speaking to us on this matter to please be sworn at this point. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth throughout the course of these proceedings? Thank you. We're pretty informal here. It's not that formal. If you'd like to come up, Mr. Clements.
I'm Mr. Mauk.
Okay, Mr. Mauk.
I'm Evanston resident and attorney representing Second Church of Christ Scientist, and a 50-year resident of Evanston. We're asking today for a variation and a special use, a variation on parking and a special use to have a church in a D3 district. I thought the Commission would benefit from some history, so I'd like to introduce and have Chuck Carrington, who's part of the leadership team, tell you about the church and its involvement in Evanston and its zoning history as it's moved around.
Hi, thank you. My name is Chuck Carrington. I live at 1019 Hull Terrace. And I'll try to make this real brief, but just the first Church of Christ Scientist was on Chicago Avenue, which is now where the Chicago Music Institute is. And back in the 30s, the church membership had grown so much that a group had spun off and started Second Church, and they built the church that is on Hurd Street, right across from Willard School. Since then, membership has dwindled, so that's why. So the first church actually merged with Second Church, and one of the things we lost when we lost First Church was a downtown location. You know, that it was just outside downtown. It was easy to get to for Northwestern students and things like that. Whereas where we are now is a little more difficult if you don't have a car to get to it. And our membership has dropped to where that church is way too big for us. It's hard to maintain it. So after spending years trying to sell it, we finally were able to find a buyer. And so then we were looking for a space that fit our size, fit our needs. And the space on Maple is much brighter. It's, you know, it's the right size for us, and it's easy to get to by public transportation. Northwestern students can get there easily, and so that's how we ended up where we are now. We also are hoping, you know, we don't have a lot of experience with, you know, doing things with the community. I mean, we have done some things, but, you know, instead of being in a residential area, now where we are, we're hoping to open our doors to any kind of, you know, to help the community also, so.
Thank you.
I have a map of the location, if I could hand that out to the commission.
Yeah. Here, just hand them to me and I'll pass them down. Thank you.
And then I want to walk the commission through the application. If you're not familiar with the specific location, it's right across from the YMCA. There's a couple parking lots around there, and it is not an intense commercial district. It is transitional between residential to the south and in some directions, and then more intense commercial to the north. The property's been vacant for, I think, 2 or 3 years. It is a single office space type condominium within a high-rise condominium that is completed and fully occupied with lots of parking in the condominium itself. Now, the application that Mr. Clements put together indicates on the second page that there will be Sunday school and church meetings. Average attendance is about 20 people. And Sunday school, Wednesday night meetings, committee meetings, board meetings, clerk's office, prayer groups, public lectures, special events, Thanksgiving, Christmas hymn, and then an adjunct reading room. The church already has a reading room on Central Street. And then about 4 hours a day, occupancy by a clerk or other people. So it'll be light occupancy, but much better than the vacancies that are around. It at least brings a measure of activity to quasi-residential, because there are all those condominiums there, but also, as I was saying, transitional between commercial and residential, because it's not a high-traffic street. In fact, if you're familiar with the art gallery that used to be there, that's been vacant for several years, and there's just lots of parking around, and not much commercial activity unless you go north to Jay's Barber Shop and Benison's Bakery. The property is part of a planned use development. It's within the planned use development that was approved for the high-rise condominium, but the the code required additional approval, special use for change from a commercial use to a religious assembly use, which is allowed by special use. It's under contract. The church has not closed on this. It's contingent on approval. The church has had a rough time getting sales of property over the years. Lots of delays and some zoning problems and inability to sell their property in Northwest Evanston because of community opposition to some of the people that wanted to buy the property. But now they have clear sailing, hopefully, to have a closing if this commission and the council approve the special use. The parking requirement, it would be 4 spaces, and the contention is and request is that that be waived because the condominium itself has a great number of spaces, but they would be expensive for the church to purchase those, almost prohibitively expensive. And there's parking on the street and on Sundays, and as Mr. Carrington noted, it's right in the middle of bus routes, the L-Stop, Metra, and then walking distance for people in the high rises. So we don't believe that it's going to be any disruption at all from the light attendance that the church has and the availability of plenty of space. If there are any questions, otherwise I'm going to move on to the special use standards.
I have a question.
Commissioner Puctel.
Thanks. It says in the packet that staff encouraged you to consider the definition of a cultural facility retail service, similar to another recent applicant. How did you consider that, and why did you decide to remain with a religious institution classification?
Well, the primary use is religious, and they didn't want to go against that, although, you know, they could have tried to maneuver that through and not gone before the commission. But the church is a democratic organization, and they said, well, let's go through the process. So they wanted to present that and be open, and thought it wasn't quite on point to say that they were a cultural institution and try and circumvent your approval. So it wasn't. I wasn't at the meeting, but that's how the congregation voted.
Is there anything you'd like to add? Clarence?
Yes, to clarify, that would not be to circumvent any kind of process or anything. It's a matter of what activities would occur in the space and therefore what the zoning use is. So in this case, the applicants felt that they did not want to have a substantial amount of active storefront activity and active uses that are open to the public for a typical amount of time that a typical business in the downtown would have. They preferred to keep it specifically to the membership of the church, and therefore the use fits the definition of religious institution.
Thank you.
Commissioner Halleck. Oh, I thought you had a question. Okay. All right. Why don't we go ahead and go through, unless you have You have a question? Okay. Why don't we go ahead and go through the rest of your presentation, and then we might have some questions following that.
Okay. The standards for special use. A, is it one of the special uses specifically listed in the zoning ordinance? Yes. B, is it in keeping with the purposes and policies of the adopted comprehensive general plan and the zoning ordinance as amended from time to time? Yes, the special uses are intended to be within the comprehensive general plan. C, it will not cause a negative cumulative effect. We don't think it will cause any negative effect. We think it will be positive to have a storefront that's been vacant for several years with a measure of activity and additional options for people in the high rise, for people in the neighborhood, for people at Northwestern to have access to this church and other activities that would go on there. Standard D does not interfere with or diminish the value of property in the neighborhood. We think there'll be a modest increase because there'll be one less vacancy instead of 3 or 4. But it won't. We don't think it will decrease because there are no stores and retail traffic within half a block or a block, depending on the directions that you go. E, can be adequately served by public facilities and services. Yes, it's a recently constructed building with all the services. I think I've addressed F, very unlikely to be any traffic congestion. G, preserves significant historical architectural resources, not applicable in this circumstance. Likewise, H, preserves significant natural and environmental features. Again, there are no significant environmental or natural features. And it does comply with all other regulations as far as we know. So it will be a nice addition, we believe. And if there are other questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Commissioner Halleck?
Yeah, unless I missed it, I didn't see anything in the submission about signage or how you would deal with the windows. Could you address that?
I didn't address it while I was talking, but I'll ask Jeff Clements to comment on that.
Okay.
Give your name and address.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Clements. I live at 413 Grove Street, and I'm vice chair of the board of the church. And I was the one that filled out the application. That's why my name appears there. I think Chuck might have been out of town. He's our chairman. So the question was signage.
And windows.
Yeah, signage and windows. Well, we're planning to have our sanctuary, as you've seen in the drawing, facing the street or in the visibility to the street. We are expecting to have some form of identification across the top of the window, or that kind of to be determined, but that would identify it as a church, Second Church of Christ Scientist, Evanston. And the availability of a Sunday school that would be included in that edifice. There are a set of blinds there that are automated, which we find to be kind of attractive. The thought is that we would be able to perhaps during the actual services that we have on Sundays and Wednesday nights, partially raise those so it's not a distraction to the members during the meetings. But that you know, there's no desire to fill the windows with anything other than just, you know, who we are and when our services are held and so forth. So I think we'll fit well within the 20% limitation. And I'd like also to just kind of correct one thing that was said. Our church does have a very specific set of guidelines of what it means to be a Christian Science church. It lays out the format of our services. It lays out the primary book, the Bible, and our primary textbook as the official pastors of the church. And so there's a set of rules, if you will, that define what the church is and how it operates. It's also a democratic organization, so that the membership votes on virtually everything that relates to, within the context of that church manual, of what we might want to do. And the church is interested in, and has historically been interested in, outreach to the community. In our current location, we've been a polling place. We've had Girl Scout troops. We've had a variety of other activities, funerals, and other things that other churches do. And in conjunction with this location, as stated in the application, we have a strong interest in providing office space and the use of the facility generally to other nonprofits that would benefit from being in that location. We've had a couple of conversations with some that already, and we're wide open to that idea. The thing that is kind of unspoken here is that in a previous building that we looked at further north on Maple, that was much bigger and that had a lot of glass and a lot of opportunity for the kind of solution that the zoning administrator was recommending, that could have been handled administratively, was involved moving our reading room from Central Street into that space. And ultimately, the membership voted against that. They love the current location. We're very active on Central Street. We're part of the business association there. We've been there for a lot of years. It's a high visibility, high traffic area, and we've spent a lot of time and heart and soul being part of the community there. And we hope to be able to do that within the context of this location in a different way as a church, and initially at least not as a reading room. The administrator has recommended that we consider the idea of consolidating the reading room into that space at some future time, which we're wide open to doing. But it will require a vote of the members. It will require some sort of a change, because at the moment, the thing that basically scuttled the last plan was the fact that there's a large group of, within our small group, there's a lot of very active people. Virtually all of the church members serve in that reading room. It's open 5 days a week. And it is an active storefront location. And we would like to bring some of that spirit to this location, but not, at least initially, by moving the reading room in there during daytime hours. So that's kind of the context for why we're focused on this. It's a perfect location. It's got light. The bullpen where the real estate agents did their business is a good size for a sanctuary of the type that we want to put in. And the conference room, the whole layout fits nicely. It's a minimal amount of expense to make it work from our point of view as a church.
The reason I asked the question is, and I'm familiar with your Central Street location. I live near there. I go by it all the time. And it's I have to say, it's very pedestrian friendly. And when in this downtown area, the reason the zoning is, well, I think what's implied in the zoning for ground floor retail is an open, friendly storefront. So I guess as much as you can within your church functions, I would encourage you to keep it open and friendly because that will enliven the streetscape, it'll
Absolutely.
probably
And we
help your
intend to do
exposure,
that. Yeah.
but I'm concerned more about the streetscape, and that's why I asked the question, because if, I would have not have been very supportive if you would have said, well, we're going to paper all the, or paint all the windows, and it's going to be
wide
totally
open.
isolated space.
It'll be open, and we are seeking to find ways to make use of it during the day, as I enumerated in the application, yeah. Thank you.
Before you have a seat, Mr. Clement, I have some questions that you're probably better suited to ask than Mr. Moak. What are your service times? I know that you have Sundays and Wednesdays.
Sunday morning is at 10:30.
Okay.
Wednesday evening is at 7:30 PM.
Okay, so the Wednesday's an evening service and the Sunday's a morning service.
Right.
Okay. You had mentioned the reaching out to like types of not-for-profits to share space with. Without going into, I don't want you to have to divulge names of who you've talked to, but what types of organizations are you looking to partner with?
Well, I think anybody who's got a mission and values that are consonant with, being in a church space. We've had contact from a literary group that has meetings and supports young writers and new writers. One of our members happens to be the poet laureate in Highland Park this year, and she's part of a group that has been looking for a space. So we were introduced to them. We've had a couple of conversations, but again, we're not in a position to, do anything until we actually decide we're going to be there. But that's an example.
Okay. The space on Central Street that's currently your reading room, and I don't know it, I know it's there, I've never been to it, I've walked by it, I'm sure. There isn't space up there for you to have a sanctuary meeting space as well. Like the two could not be combined on Central Street as opposed to at this location.
We've looked at that, and we were discouraged by the administrator and others at trying to do that. And largely it centers around parking and the competition for parking, the restaurants and others that are there. We've had multiple proposals going up a story, trying to figure out a way to do the parking, and really haven't come up with something that we think would pass the city council ultimately, and the neighbors. I mean, the neighbors really do not want, additional traffic competing for their, brunch crowd on Sunday mornings there.
And hypothetically here, if you were to use that location, what's your membership like in terms of, do most people drive? How many people are you roughly talking about for an average Sunday attendance?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the moment, we're renting back the facility that we sold on Hurd Street. We have on any given Sunday morning, we probably have 20 people that are there. Everyone drives. Some people come from downtown Chicago. Some people come from as far north as Glencoe to attend. And we have another 10 or 15 that have become accustomed to attending on Zoom, and we're working to encourage them to come back to actually be active members. But somewhere between 20 and 30 would be a good Sunday.
Okay.
Wednesday nights are a little less well attended in terms of the people that drive, and again, Zoom kind of fills in the gap for people that are uncomfortable driving at night.
Okay. And one last question for you. You are a religious institution, therefore I'm assuming you're a tax-exempt organization as well? Mm-hmm. And so you would not be paying property taxes on this particular location?
That's true.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Just a couple of questions.
Yeah. Again, I just wanted to ask a little bit more about the parking situation. The packet, it said that the parking in the condo wasn't available. Is there parking? What's the?
I think
Yeah. What's?
there are units that could be bought, but I think, how much were they?
Yeah, I think each unit was $30,000 cash, and then an additional $45 a month for each space. And we felt that was kind of outside of our budget. We did learn subsequent to this application.
Could you please just step forward a
I'm
little bit so I
sorry.
make sure
I'm
that
sorry,
the
yeah.
microphone's picking you up?
We did learn that there are 5 parking spots that are currently reserved for the bank as part of an easement when they made their deal with what was at that time it was Chase, yeah, it was Chase. Now it's the Community Bank of Evanston, and they have the right to 5 daytime spaces inside the building on the ground floor. Those spaces are available in non-business hours to condo residents and to our group. So that could provide, and there's typical availability there in the hours that we would be looking for them. So we would, while we wouldn't own those, we would have the right to use them, and we think that will, help in terms of providing at least our first and second reader and our soloist and a few of the other people that run the services to have spots that they can aim for on those off hours, non-business hours.
Other questions from commissioners?
I have one small question. When
Sure.
people come to your services, are there families that come, or it's mainly individuals and everybody is with a car? Because the code is made a kind of a 1 parking space per 4 usually attendants. Is this common, or it's usually 1 per car?
No, the code is 1 for 4 seats.
Yes, usually. I'm not sure exactly in this case. Is 1 for 10? Okay.
But to answer your question, it is a mix. There are some individuals that come, but there are families and certainly a lot of couples.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? If not, I'm sorry, just a second. No other questions?
Just one question, and I'm sure you have looked at this, but it does seem a pretty small layout for everything that you're trying to include in there. Do you all feel pretty confident that this is going to serve your needs? I mean, it's a kind of it's not a very deep storefront, and so I'm just curious as to whether it really will serve everything that you're looking for it to do.
Yeah, we like the idea of after having been spread out in a 350 seat auditorium for these years, we like the idea of being able to kind of be closer together. And I think certainly in the auditorium, the space that we've designated there, and having 40 seats maybe readily on any given Sunday will be more than adequate. The Sunday school also is relatively small. It could be done between the conference room that is in the front of the building by the windows and a second conference room that's on the other side. There's enough room there to work, and we've gone through it. We have a good interior designer who's a member of our congregation who's looked at it, and we haven't taken the time to formally, finalize that design, but the preliminary design that you've seen is adequate for our needs.
All right. At this point, I'm going to ask if there's anybody from the public who would like to speak. I see a hand go up over here. I don't believe you were here when I swore everybody in, so I'm going to swear you in. If you would just raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be true?
I swear.
Thank you. And if you please state your name and address for the record.
I am Jeff Borini. I live at 1800 Ridge. I also have a condo at 1640 Maple. And I apologize for coming late. I thought this meeting started at 8, so I didn't see the full presentation. And I want to begin by expressing my respect and for the church representatives here, and think they've done a fine job of putting this together. I have a question I'd just like to make sure is part of the discussion. I don't even know if it's part of the purview of the Land Use Commission or not, but it concerns the sort of economic impact of this decision. You noted just momentarily that it comes off the tax rolls if this goes forward. We just read this week that Quartet Copies is coming off the tax rolls too, and is going to be used for religious purposes just a little bit further north than this. And so I just wonder how this fits with any kind of economic development plan for the city. You know, right now the city is struggling to try to revitalize the downtown. This property is not currently retail property, so it's office space already, but it does pay taxes. Whether it could be retail, I have no idea. And I'm not saying that this is a bad idea necessarily, but I just think it ought to be part of the discussion and see how it fits in a larger plan. That's all. So, all right, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have anything they'd like to respond?
I was just going to make a comment on that, you know, this question comes up all the time about downtown because more and more storefronts are being used for not retail, for medical offices or, you know, other such things which don't draw as many customers and they don't add to the street life and all that. So I think it's an issue. I don't know, maybe staff can say what the feeling on it is. We are going comprehensive plan right now, so maybe this issue frankly should come up because economic development is super important.
This can be a discussion as it relates to the standards for approval. So if you feel that discussion of the tax base is something that could be part of standard 2, whether or not it complies with the purposes and policies of the comprehensive general plan, in that respect, then yes, it could be within the purview of the commission. It depends on your interpretation ultimately.
I think, at least for me, the issue is degree. No one is saying you can't have a office, you can't have a church, you can't have it's just that if you have 90% of those kinds of functions, the downtown is absolutely dead. So that it's a question of degree, and I don't know that seems like a very broad issue that is not part of our purview, but it certainly could be part of the comprehensive plan, which is why I brought it up. But.
All right. I have one question for Ms. Klotz. I asked the question earlier about expanding on Central Street, and it was mentioned that that was something that the city had dissuaded them from looking into.
Not exactly. It was looking at an expansion of the current reading room location, and if the expansion goes up, then the Central Street Overlay District makes it nearly impossible, and if the extension goes back, then it takes up the parking lot and there's no parking left. So it's unfortunately in that situation, the zoning ordinance makes it very difficult.
Okay. All right, thank you. At this point, Mr. Malk, if you would like to come up, may say anything you'd like to say in summation, if you'd like to respond to the citizen comment.
Yeah, just one point. The real estate tax exemption, I live in Evanston and pay taxes, and I know we all have that as a long-term issue. The sale of the property that the church owns or did own in North Evanston, a very large property, that's going back on the tax rolls as far as I can tell, because it's no longer owned by a religious organization. And that's part of the ebb and flow. So they're actually going to be a net addition to taxes if you look at the overview that a large exempt property across from, what school is that? Willard School. Yeah, right across from Willard, if you're familiar with that property. I don't know what the developer's going to do, build townhouses or whatever, but that's part of the economic mix when a church sells a building It may sell to another church, it may sell to a developer, so properties go off and on. In this case, it should be a slight increase in tax revenues, given the trade-offs. And that was my only comment.
All right, anything you'd like to say in summation before we close the record?
No.
All right, thank you. With that, we will close the public testimony and begin deliberation. I will ask for general thoughts from commissioners.
You have a comment?
Commissioner Halleck?
This is my question. Actually, I first wanted to say that I think I think this is a better location than the Central Street location, just because it's in the center of closer to the center of downtown. There's public parking nearby. There's many more parking facilities available than certainly there are on Central Street. I have a question on staff, because four parking spaces, 0 parking, there's not that much of an effect one way or the other, I don't think, on the actual parking situation. My question is, if this were a new church, and it had the same population occupancy, what would the parking requirement be?
4 spaces.
Oh, it would be. Okay. All right. I thought there might be a big difference, and that's why I was asking, well, why does moving into an existing building make a difference? But that's...
For most uses listed in the zoning ordinance, when a use locates in an existing building, there is no new parking requirement, because a lot of times you can't make more parking magically appear.
Yeah.
But in the case of religious institutions, there is a parking requirement when one moves into an existing building, specifically for the point that you're getting at, that it could be a very large congregation that has a significant parking demand that the building wasn't originally built for.
Right.
In this case, it's pretty minor.
Yeah.
Other comments, not questions, but comments?
Sure. I think this is a reasonable location. I spent a lot of time on Central Street, and then also a lot of time, kind of at Lemoy and Benison's and all. And this particular block really is kind of not a very trafficked retail area. I think that there are a couple of things that, the parking variation doesn't particularly bother me, because on Sundays there is a lot of parking in and near the downtown. I think that the testimony that there are the 5 commercial spaces in that development that could be used for Sunday services, for example, is something that we ought to note in the communications, so that I think that there's plenty of options for parking. The other thing with respect to the active, the conditions that were suggested by staff, I think that it's important that not only do you want to make sure that the windows aren't totally covered, we want to make sure that the signage is in compliance with the sign code as well. Because I don't think, I think in this location, we don't want to be dealing with, sign variation requests in addition to the windows. I am not sure that, while I think that it's important to try to keep the active storefront uses to the extent possible, I think that the suggestion that the reading room be located is not appropriate. I think it's in a good location on Central Street now. And then finally, with respect to taxes, because that was a question that I had as well, I looked up and, just the tax bill for their 2 tax parcel numbers involved, and for the 2022 tax year, which is the last one that all the taxes have been paid, the taxes was a little more than $32,000. maybe $33,000. But the property value, according to the assessor, is $561,000. And I think you have to look in, as to whether or not that has a significant impact. And the last time I looked, which is a few years ago, Evanston's tax base was over $2 billion. So $500,000 in assess. The new location. I don't know what the old location was. Right, but the current location is being taxed as commercial property, so it's got a higher assessment rate. But I think the point is that none of us are going to see the difference in our tax bills with this property coming off of the tax rolls. So I think that you have to look at kind of what the value to the community would be in having a more active, or at least an active, somewhat active use in that location, as opposed to a vacant storefront that may or may not be occupied in the foreseeable future. And, I think we have to realize that, if you look at downtown, there are a lot more doctors and fitness centers and other things occupying ground floor. And I think that the reality is, when we're talking about it in terms of the comprehensive plan, that for the time being, that's probably something we may have to live with for a while.
Commissioner Westerberg, did you have something that you wanted to?
Ms. Glotz, are you aware of how long this storefront has been vacant? It was mentioned 2 to 3 years. Do you know specifically?
I don't know definitively. I know Dreamtown Realty was there, but questionable on if they were there for how long or really actively using the space. If they were there recently, they were rarely using the space.
And before them, or were they the original?
I believe before them it was vacant again. I can remember this specific property going back 10 years and having problems filling the space.
Okay. And then the space, I think that's at 1569, which is immediately north of the space that the church is looking at. That apparently is going to become, is that going to become owned by a not-for-profit? Is that what I heard? Do you know?
I'm not sure of that one offhand.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other thoughts on this side? Commissioner Mirinchev?
I would support this project simply because it's the variances that are requested are reasonable in my mind. The only thing that I would add is I would agree with the staff recommendation about the active front, and they suggested to flip the locations of the reading room and the sanctuary. Maybe it may not be appropriate, but I would say that something like a note or condition would be that the architectural design should emphasize the storefront in any reasonable form and fashion. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Before I go through standards, just my general thoughts. I'm kind of torn on this one. I'm an advocate for obviously filling vacant storefronts. When we're looking at something that fills a vacant storefront from anywhere from 11 to 18 hours a week, and it's locked in at that, because they would be purchasing the property. It kind of harkens me back to the days I lived just north of Howard Street, and we had tons of storefront churches in the day on Howard Street that were active less than that, but still it's about trying to create some level of engagement in these spaces. I'm a church administrator. I know how difficult it can be to find people to rent to. I imagine it is much more difficult if I had to give my entire congregation a vote Now, granted, we are a much larger congregation, but still trying to get people on board for what type of people we would rent to, things like that can be problematic. I understand that's your model. I'm not advocating that you change your model or anything like that. I'm just seeing that that is a potential issue down the road. In terms of tax rolls, yes, one individual building doesn't make a big difference in the overall tax roll when we look at the city, but when we start nipping away at it a little bit at a time, all of a sudden it becomes a big problem. You know, it's again, 32,000 here, 20,000 here, 80,000 here, and all of a sudden you've built a significant amount of money up. And I think it's very different. We've talked a little bit about some of the offices and doctors' offices, things like that. Those are spaces that are usually open for 40 hours a week. Typically a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, maybe a little bit later, evening hours on some. I'm really kind of torn on this one as to exactly where I come down on it. I see pros for it. I see cons for it. And I just have to figure out in the next couple minutes before I go through standards, kind of which one of those works for me, and I think works for the city. I mean, I think, you know, there was discussion about a reading room maybe coming down. I think something like that definitely would put my hesitancy a little more at ease, because it is increasing the amount of traffic that's coming in. But those are just kind of my general thoughts, I guess, on that. In terms of the parking, I don't think the parking is an issue.
I don't know if I could help you make your decision or not, but the
Try,
one,
George, try.
Well, on this issue of storefronts, I don't think, as was mentioned, it's not a primary retail street,
Right.
and I think it might even be considered questionable whether it's a retail street at all. So,
I mean, we've designated as a retail
I
street.
understand.
And
I
so-
understand, but
So I guess part of my hesitancy, and I appreciate your input, and I've thought about that, is if we kind of say this is not going to be a focal point for retail, are we just kind of writing off this block as not being someplace that we're going to focus on retail? And I think it would be different for me, a little bit different if it were something where the building were not being purchased or the unit were not being purchased, because I have no problem with these individual people. They're fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I think that the issue is what happens if membership dwindles down to 5 people and they're just doing a Sunday morning service and that's it. They own the building. They can sustain the building. Have we just created a situation in which we've created a non-vacant vacant space?
this is going to spin into a bigger issue, but the issue with retail downtown is not, you're not going to solve the problem by approving or not approving this or other facilities like this. I think they're minor. I know they all, in the aggregate, they could be a big issue, but the issue is, how do you encourage restaurants and those kinds of activities downtown? And one of the ways to do that is to bring more people downtown, have more residences downtown, I believe. It's not going to be what we're doing here. I don't think that's going to, you know what I mean?
Right.
You know, it could be. I mean, if you've got people using whatever building it is, they're downtown and could go to a restaurant or Benison's or any number of those facilities. I think what's probably, important is that we want to encourage them to reach out to the other potential partners who could make use of the facility as well. So, I mean, I think that, we'll get to the conditions later, but I think that probably on that first one, we want to say that an active storefront that incorporates regular business hours, the facility is open to the public, is strongly encouraged, period. I don't think we want to, I would be reluctant to start talking about, within 5 years, they've got to move the reading room from Central Street or any of that.
I don't want to do that either.
But, I think that encouraging them to have more activity in that space will be helpful for the businesses that are on Davis Street. And frankly, that's the business district that we're talking about right now.
And like I said, I fully understand that, but I also know the realistic challenges that face renting church space. I have a much larger facility, and it's a challenge to rent. It's a challenge to find people. Lots of people want to come and use your space for free, but if you're intending to try to generate any sort of income off of it or anything, it makes it more difficult.
I think the other issue.
You can in certain situations.
The other issue is to remember this is a church, and a church is meant to have some privacy for its members because that's the nature of the activities that are going on there. And while I would certainly love to see how it can be extended towards the community as well, it has to fall within the framework that the church has established.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of the challenge.
Yeah. All right. Why don't we go through the parking first, since I think that's going to be the easier of the two to go through. If staff wants to bring that up on the standards for approval of a major variation. There are 7 of them, and these are the ones that are there. The first one being the requested variation will not have a substantial adverse impact on the use, enjoyment, or property values of adjoining properties. When we're talking about the parking, requiring them to have 4 parking spaces versus 0 parking spaces, I don't think is going to greatly impact the neighborhood, especially the times at which they will be using the street parking is not times that there's going to be a heavy demand on the downtown parking on Sunday mornings. Also, we've heard testimony to the fact that there are 5 parking spaces that are owned by the bank as part of their agreement, and those can be made available potentially to this individual applicant since it will be an off-banking hours. So I believe that standard is met. Number 2, the requested variation is in keeping with the intent of the zoning ordinance. I think that when we look at our downtown core area, starting to put a whole bunch of parking requirements on existing buildings when a business is trying to come into them is much different than trying to apply parking to a newly constructed building as part of a planned development or something along those lines. I believe that this standard is met. The alleged hardship or practical difficulty is peculiar to the property. Yes, I believe the building stands as it is. There is not additional places to find parking. The parking has all been maxed out on this particular site. And so I believe that this property does create a practical difficulty in terms of trying to find 4 parking spaces. Number 4, the property owner would suffer a particular hardship or practical difficulty as distinguished from a mere inconvenience if the strict letter of the regulations were to be carried out. We heard testimony from the applicant that they did speak with members of representatives of the condominium. In order to acquire parking spaces would be something in the neighborhood of $120,000 plus ongoing maintenance fees of about $180 a month. That seems to me like that falls more into the not being a mere inconvenience, but more of a practical difficulty, so I believe that standard is met. The purpose of the variation is not based exclusively upon a desire to extract additional income from the property. This particular organization being a church, they're not trying to rent or sell space at exorbitant amounts. Obviously, if they're able to get a few dollars here and there from renting the space, that's something that is perfectly within their rights to do, but they aren't going to get rich on it. They also are using this for their own personal services and meetings, things like that. So I believe that standard is met. Number 6, the alleged difficulty or hardship has not been created by any person having an interest in the property. The particular applicant here is coming and finding a property in its state that it exists in. And so the parking is the parking, and nothing they have done or could do would affect the ability to find those 4 parking spaces on site. And number 7, the requested variation requires the least deviation from the applicable regulation of the feasible options identified before the Land Use Commission. Again, we're going from 4 spaces to 0 spaces, but because of the off time that it is, I believe that the variation would not create a huge impact, and therefore is the least deviation needed. Is everyone in agreement with my findings of fact on the parking exemption? With that, I'll ask if let's do these separately. So if there's a motion to grant the major, or to, well, we have to do these together, though, because they're both have to fall under the special use.
You can make separate motions, though.
Okay, so let's make a separate motion. So is there a motion to grant the major variation for parking as requested?
I move that we recommend that the city council approve the major variation with respect to parking for 24 ZMJV-0014.
All right, is there a second? Moved by Lindwald, seconded by Westerberg. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Aravallo?
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Linwall?
Yes.
Commissioner Mudinchev?
Yes.
Commissioner Pucktell?
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Yes.
Chair Rogers?
Yes, so with 8 in favor and 0 against, that motion does carry. We will now go through the standards for the special use. There are 9 of these. The first one being is the special use, one of the listed special uses in the zoning district in which the property lies, and yes, it is. Number 2, it complies with the purposes and policies of the comprehensive general plan and the zoning ordinance. This is the area where, again, I'm kind of torn on the tax issue, and bringing in a slightly less than ideal, in my opinion at least, active presence in this particular location. I know that most of my fellow commissioners are probably going to say that it does meet the standard, but I am going to say that, in my opinion, it does not meet the standard. But I will let you, if anybody wants to chime in and give their opinion on it.
Sure. I believe it does meet the purposes and policies by activating a vacant storefront.
All right, thank you. Number 3, it does not cause a negative cumulative effect in combination with existing special uses or as a category of land use. I believe that this would not have a negative cumulative effect. Obviously, any increase in presence on the particular property is a positive. Bringing something in that would bring some life into the area, I believe is a bonus. So I believe that standard is met. Number 4, it does not interfere with or diminish the value of property in the neighborhood. There's no reason to believe that a religious institution operating in this location would appear to the average person to be anything other than just a typical use of either an office space or something like that. There's not going to be, from the testimony we received, placarding of the front windows or anything like that. So from the street view, most people will not even notice that this is a religious institution versus anything else that would be occupying this space. So I believe that standard is met. Number 5 is adequately served by public facilities and services. This is a newer constructed building. The addition of a religious institution is not going to place that much demand on the building. So I believe that standard is met. Number 6, it does not cause undue traffic congestion. We addressed this in our previous motion about the parking, that because the typical service times are outside of the general operating time for most downtown businesses, that this should not cause any traffic congestion in the area. It's also on the edge of our downtown community. Number 7, it preserves significant historical architectural resources. There will be no change to the facility whatsoever in terms of the building. Number 8, it preserves significant natural and environmental resources. Again, there will be no changes to the outside of the building, so nothing would change there. And number 9, it complies with all other applicable regulations. I have no reason to believe that the particular occupants here would not comply with whatever regulations they needed to in order to occupy this space safely and legally, and that therefore that standard is met. I will ask if everyone is in agreement with the exception of standard number 2, which I believe is the one that there was discussion on. With that, I will ask if there is a motion.
I'll make the motion related to the request for special use for religious institution at 1567 Maple Avenue, 24 ZMJV-0014, that the Land Use Commission will make a positive recommendation to the City Council. And that recommendation would include the conditions reviewed by the staff, proposed by the staff, to incorporate as far as possible an active storefront, that the storefront windows shall not be more than 20% covered and be in compliance with the sign code, that the project is in substantial compliance with the documents and testimony, and that the special use ordinance be recorded with the Cook County Recorder of Deeds.
Before I ask for a second, one of those conditions included the encouragement to move the reading room within 5 years. And I believe that that was not something that the commission was in favor of, so I would ask if that could be stricken.
Yes, and I did not read that for that very reason, but yes, so
Just to make it clear.
Just to make it clear, the condition would be that there'd be as active a storefront as possible when the facility is open to the public as well as to its members during its business hours.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure people understood you weren't paraphrasing, that you were not reading that for a
Understood.
purpose.
And I'd like to just make sure that the reference for the storefront windows, that the signage also should be in compliance with the sign code.
Okay.
Second?
It's been moved by Commissioner Westerberg, seconded by Commissioner Puccitel. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Aravallo?
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Linwall?
Yes.
Commissioner Mudinchev?
Yes.
Commissioner Puctel?
Yes.
Commissioner Westerberg?
Yes.
Chair Rogers?
No. So with a vote of 7-1, the measure will move forward to City Council with a positive recommendation. And like I told the previous applicant, we will work with Ms. Klotz, and she'll let you know when you'll appear on City Council's agenda and anything that you may need to do to help prepare for that. Thank you. Good luck with your project. With that, we will continue on with our agenda items. The next item on our agenda is communication. Does staff have anything they would like to share with us? Do we have anything we would like to share with staff?
When is the next time we're going to hear an update on the comp plan? Oh, sorry, wrong person.
So HDR is working on the existing conditions report now. I don't have an exact date of when we will have a final version to present, but we do intend to provide some kind of update this month, just general updates of
Will we hear anything about the initial survey that was done?
that. That's the intention.
That's what you're talking about.
To get some of the data for what we've heard and
Okay.
numbers for that.
All right. Any other communications from staff? We do have a section for public comment. I note there's still one person here who just gave me the I don't want to make another comment. So there will be no additional public comment. With that, I'll ask if there is a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned until our next meeting, which will be in this room on May 22nd at 7 o'clock p.m. Thank you.